How to lose weight? Not recommending aerobic exercise. There has been a long-standing misconception that aerobic exercise burns fat and strength training builds muscle. Therefore, people believe that to lose weight, you should do aerobic exercises, while strength training will only make you bigger and bulkier. This is actually a mistaken idea. Any type of exercise is unrelated to weight loss. Your weight and fat levels are determined by your diet. Exercise only helps you increase your energy expenditure, allowing you to eat a bit more without feeling so deprived. Without a calorie deficit, even if you do so much aerobic exercise that your legs give out, you won't successfully lose weight. If we compare weight loss to making money, aerobic exercise is like having a job. You only get a little bit of consumption each day you do aerobic exercise, and once you stop, no one pays you, and you'll soon face a financial crisis commonly known as a rebound. No one wants to go through months of hardship only to gain the weight back, unless you plan to cut your intake even more in the future. On the other hand, strength training is like starting a business. When you accumulate muscle mass through consistent training, even if you stop working out later, your muscle remains and your metabolism will still be higher than the average person. Moreover, relying on aerobic exercise will deplete your muscle mass, lowering your metabolism, meaning you'll have to eat even less, which creates a vicious cycle. Strength training not only increases calorie consumption on the day you train, but also during the muscle growth process that follows, requiring energy. This illustrates the difference between short-term and long-term effects. Those who want to lose weight are generally individuals with a higher body weight. The heavier you are, the more pressure you put on your knees when running or jumping rope. Of course, you can choose swimming or hiking, but knee damage is irreversible. Strength training, on the other hand, increases calorie expenditure while also building muscle to protect your joints, showing a clear advantage. The primary benefit of aerobic exercise is improving cardiovascular endurance, which quickly declines once you stop training. However, aerobic exercise doesn't enhance cardiovascular endurance as effectively as high-intensity interval training, HIIT, or many load-bearing movements in strength training. We can entirely choose other, more cost-effective training methods. As long as your diet maintains a calorie deficit, any type of training will help you lose weight. But to avoid a rebound, it's essential to do less aerobic exercise and more strength training. The difference between natural fitness and tech-enhanced fitness. Today, we have invited Canadian fitness expert Christian Thiba C. Bani to explain this topic to us. The following video will be presented with Chinese translation. First of all, I want to say that from a moral standpoint, I do not oppose the use of steroids, as long as it is done under supervision. That said, I would still say that anabolic steroids are among the most destructive things for the body. The common view in the fitness industry is that natural athletes and tech-enhanced athletes will respond to the same plan in the same way. The only difference is that those using tech enhancements will achieve greater growth. However, this is not the case, because when you use anabolic steroids or other high-performance technology, you basically change the physiological functions of your body. So the body's response to training is completely different. If natural fitness enthusiasts imitate the training methods of tech-enhanced fitness, it may actually lead to muscle loss. Let me explain why. The first major difference is that natural athletes need to use training itself to trigger protein synthesis to build muscle. But those using tech enhancements are basically always in a state of elevated protein synthesis, because that is what steroids do. They increase the rate of protein synthesis. So these individuals do not need to trigger maximum protein synthesis through exercise. Since protein synthesis is already elevated, any type of training they do will work. But for natural fitness enthusiasts, their body synthesis and breakdown states are balanced, with protein synthesis and protein degradation levels being the same. So if you want to increase muscle mass, you need to trigger protein synthesis yourself, because you don't have products to do that for you. You have to use training to do it. This means your training must reach a certain threshold to trigger maximum protein synthesis, meaning maximum muscle fiber fatigue and activation of mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin, are very important. But there's a big problem. You cannot do anything that will inhibit protein synthesis. You need to eliminate all factors that can inhibit protein synthesis. The main factors here are cortisol and an enzyme called myostatin. These are the two things that most inhibit or even stop protein synthesis. So if you trigger these two things during training, you are likely to reduce or stop your gains. Why does cortisol rise? Cortisol rises because when you train, you need to mobilize fuel energy stored in muscle or fat cells. The more energy you need to mobilize, the more cortisol you release. Cortisol will stop or greatly reduce protein synthesis and also increase the level of myostatin. The higher the level of myostatin, the less muscle your body allows you to grow. So cortisol will prevent muscle growth through these two mechanisms. The more sets and reps you do in each training session, the more fuel you need, and the more energy you need to mobilize, the more cortisol you release. So this is the first big difference between tech-enhanced and natural fitness. Natural fitness enthusiasts cannot perform large volumes of training in each session because it will increase more cortisol. Steroid users will also face the same problem, but the issue is that anabolic hormone derivatives themselves actually weaken the effect of cortisol, meaning the more hormones you have, the less cortisol you have in your body. Therefore, those using tech enhancements are not as affected by the increase in cortisol as natural athletes are. This is the first difference. Tech-enhanced athletes can do more training volume because they are looking at it from the perspective of protein synthesis, not recovery. But as a natural trainer, you cannot do that much training volume. This is the second major difference. Natural athletes need to use training to trigger protein synthesis. As I mentioned, it stands to reason that the more frequently I train muscles, the more muscle growth I will have. If someone uses steroids, protein synthesis will be elevated throughout the week, so it is always growing muscle. But for natural trainers, protein synthesis will only be elevated for 24 to 36 hours. So if I only train a muscle once a week, then I'm basically only growing muscle for a day and a half. If natural trainers only train each muscle once a week, you cannot expect maximum or even rapid muscle growth. It requires training each muscle at least twice a week, every mass, ideally 3 times a week, so that for most of the week, protein synthesis in that muscle is elevated. Therefore, if you are training naturally, your recovery ability is very low. If you still want to train muscles frequently, you cannot train them with too much volume. So for natural athletes, each training session should have lower volume, but more frequent training sessions. The third difference is training weight. If you're training naturally, you can use heavy weights, but if you are training with tech enhancements, the risk of injury will be higher. The reason is that anabolic steroids make muscles grow faster and larger, and they also increase the nervous system's ability to recruit muscle fibers. So your muscles grow very quickly, but tendons do not have time to keep up, resulting in a higher risk of injury. Natural trainers' nervous systems, muscles, and tendons grow at almost the same rate, so you can lift heavier weights with a lower risk of injury. Not to mention, some steroids actually make tendons more fragile, so this is the third difference. It is worth noting that those using anabolic steroids respond well to doing very high repetitions because the muscle pump will deliver nutrients to the muscles. The higher the repetitions, the more blood flows into the muscles, and the muscle pump will deliver nutrients from the blood to the muscles. Therefore, for tech-enhanced fitness, all they need to do is deliver these nutrients, which is why the pump works well for them because they do not need to trigger protein synthesis. But the same does not apply to natural trainers. Lightweight, high repetition sets, supersets, giant sets, and drop sets are ineffective for natural trainers. Why? Because you consume too much fuel. The more glycogen you burn, the more cortisol rises, which negatively affects natural trainers. So this is the third difference. Natural trainers should focus more on heavier weights, such as 6 to 8 reps per set, sometimes even 3 to 5 reps with heavy weights. Tech-enhanced athletes can get more benefits from higher repetitions and pump sets, like drop sets and short rest intervals. So you can see that everyone needs to train hard, that's a fact. But unfortunately, the same type of training that works well for tech-enhanced fitness does not work well for natural training. It is a big mistake for natural trainers to try to replicate the training methods of bodybuilders. It might make them feel great during the workout, but in the long run, the pump does not translate to actual muscle tissue. So you need to focus on higher frequency, lower volume, and higher intensity. These are the three things you need to focus on. What is the difference between muscle growth and strength increase? Are muscle size and strength related? First, we need to understand the respective attributes of strength and muscle hypertrophy. Strength refers to how much weight we can lift, with the goal being to lift heavier weights over time. Ultimately, strength can be considered a performance outcome. Muscle hypertrophy, on the other hand, differs from strength as it involves growing more muscle for aesthetic purposes, not necessarily related to how much weight we can lift. Therefore, hypertrophy is a structural adaptation rather than a performance outcome. However, the two are closely related. For example, a study analyzed the relationship between maximum strength and muscle mass in weightlifters. The study found a linear increase between the 1-rep max in squats, bench presses, and deadlifts, and the athlete's muscle mass. Heavier weight classes tend to have more muscle mass than lighter weight classes, indicating that, to some extent, more muscle generally means greater strength. But muscle size is just one factor in strength performance. Other factors that affect strength include neural efficiency, lifting technique, muscle architecture, and anatomical structure. Muscle hypertrophy, because it does not aim for strength performance, focuses more on targeting the specific muscle and minimizing the involvement of other muscles during exercises. In contrast, strength sports emphasize the coordinated effort of all neuromuscular systems, similar to how boxers use their whole body, pushing off the ground, rotating, and twisting their waist when throwing a punch. In training, since hypertrophy does not require strength performance, the weights chosen are usually those that make the target muscles feel good, with stable movements and controllable weights, typically ranging between 60% to 85% of the 1-rep max. On the other hand, strength training often involves weights between 85% to 100% of the 1-rep max. Hypertrophy training focuses more on body proportions such as shoulder-to-waist ratio and waist-to-hip ratio, whereas strength training emphasizes the overall muscle structure of the entire body, resulting in a stronger core muscle group. Ultimately, over time, the two types of training lead to two different extremes. The most important thing is to be clear about your fitness goals. How should we choose between free weights and machines? What are their respective advantages and disadvantages? First, it is essential to understand that muscles do not know what form of resistance we are using to train them. Since muscle hypertrophy is a structural adaptation, it does not have a mandatory form of exercise. Advantages of free weights. 1. Freedom of movement. The primary advantage of free weights is the freedom of trajectory, since they can move in any direction. This means you can adjust the movement pattern to target specific muscles more effectively. Machines usually allow adjustments to only a few elements, such as the seat position, but the movement pattern is fixed and cannot be altered. Given that everyone's body structure is slightly different, the same machine may not be suitable for all trainees. 2. Engagement of more muscle groups. When using free weights, besides the target muscles, auxiliary and stabilizing muscles are also involved, making the workout more efficient. For example, barbell squats have been shown to induce high muscle activation levels in all lower body muscles, from the glutes to the quadriceps, hamstrings, and even calves. Studies have also confirmed that bent-over rows are among the best exercises for working the entire back muscle group. A study sponsored by A compared various back exercises and found that barbell rows produce strong muscle activation in the latissimus dorsi, middle and lower trapezius, rhomboids, and erector spinae. While barbell rows might not be the best exercise for every pulling muscle, they seem to be the best overall for targeting all pulling muscles. Number 3. Joint friendliness. Due to the versatility and flexibility of free weights, everyone can find a training method that suits their anatomical structure. Some fixed machines, due to their construction, may sometimes place our joints in dangerous positions, increasing the risk of injury. Advantages of machines. 1. Consistent tension. Free weights can only provide downward resistance due to gravity, with resistance decreasing or increasing along the movement trajectory. Machines can apply resistance in various directions and maintain consistent tension throughout the entire range of motion, which can be beneficial in specific cases for certain muscles. 2. Ease of use. Machines do not require much technical skill to execute correctly, allowing more focus on the target muscles without worrying about other muscles or joints. For example, in a seated leg extension, 100% of the pressure is applied to the quadriceps with almost no way to use other parts to compensate. 3. Stability. This can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that it allows you to focus the tension on a single muscle or muscle group without worrying too much about auxiliary muscle groups or the nervous system. This means we can reduce fatigue in the nervous system and other muscles, but it also means spending more time training other parts of the body. Conclusion. Both forms of resistance have their unique advantages. We can start with free weight exercises when we are full of energy and use some isolated machine exercises towards the end of each training session to maximize efficiency.